Sing it out to the ends of the earth today. Come on, church, we're going to lift a strong voice for the King. Whoa, we shout it out. We shout it out and lift up one voice in worship. Sing it out until all the earth, till they can hear it. Jesus is alive and He saves. He rescues and saves. So we shout it out. Hey! We shout it out and lift up one voice in worship. Sing it out until all the earth, till they can hear it. Jesus is alive and He saves. He rescues and saves. He rescues and saves. Come on, lift up Him. Hallelujah. Somebody shout to God today. We exalt You. In Jesus, You have won. Come on, lift your voice. You have broken every chain with love and mercy. You've triumphed over death, and You are worthy of glory and praise. Well, church, isn't He worthy this morning? Yeah, that's good. Why don't you turn to someone and say, welcome to church. We're here to worship Jesus, so you better wake up this morning. Rise, open, we open the gates. Come on, with Your heart's desire, only God, renown, build a sky for You.
But there is a meal of freedom. And I believe today we can walk out of here completely free. So Jesus took the bread and He broke it and He blessed it. He said, "This is my body, which is broken for you. Whenever you do this, remember me." Father, we ask Your blessing on this bread. As we partake in an incredible So what does this cup represent? You've heard me say this before. This is not a reward for being good. This is a cup of grace. But today I'd like freedom that we can find ourselves in. I ask that as we drink Your grace, is that my high school report cards will become public someday. There are others that would have every reason to brag about their ACTs, SATs, and GPAs. And yet what they've discovered is that when they were in school, first there were the lessons and then there was the tests. But when you get in real life, usually the test comes first and then you learn the lessons. And then there are those who are really good at getting what they want. They know how to work the system. They know how to acquire power and prestige and wealth and all the toys that come with them. But when everything is stripped away, that can be very disorienting to them. There's something I call ICU wisdom, intensive care unit. When life can be counted down in minutes, it is there that you realize what is important and who is important. And in all of those rooms that I have been in the course of my ministry, I never saw anybody get it wrong. Why do we have to wait until we're in that room to get wise? God is committed to giving wisdom to anyone who asks for it. James tells us so. And he gives it liberally, and he gives it without any demeaning tone in his voice at all. Wisdom seems to be the ability to understand what is happening, to find meaning in what is going on, to know what to do now and prepare for what is next. Wisdom doesn't pray for supernatural insight at the final exam. Wisdom studies all semester. Wisdom doesn't pray for a supernatural change of heart in the divorce courtroom. Wisdom consistently invests in the marriage. So where can we gather this wisdom? Where can we gain this wisdom? And there's a most famous verse of scripture about this. It's in Proverbs, the 9th chapter. It says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." And for lots of people, this is a very confusing passage. Is God asking us to be terrified of him or by him? Is that how we actually gain wisdom? And I think we fail to understand this passage because we don't really understand what the word means. So let me break it down into two concepts for you today. And the first is this, that you begin to acquire wisdom when you are more impressed with God than anyone else. When you are more impressed with God than anyone else. You see, when we are more impressed with lesser things, our heart tends to get a little bit disoriented. We become distracted. We lose our sense of direction. The values that guide our lives no longer seem to guide them, and they no longer seem to guard us. But it is astonishing how good our decisions are when we're more impressed with God than we are with anyone else. Our decisions tend to be marked by things like honesty and transparency and compassion when Jesus is actually at the center of it all. When we are impressed by lesser things, there are other influences on those kinds of decisions. Wisdom also begins when you are more concerned with God's opinion than anyone else's opinion. When you are more concerned with God's opinion than anyone else's opinion. When you're going to make a big decision, who comes to mind about who you're going to have to explain this to? Are you concerned with how your friends are going to gauge your choice? Are you concerned with how your family is going to evaluate your decision? Are you concerned with professors or classmates or co-workers about how they are going to weigh in or what they are going to think about the decision that you have made? The question I have this morning is, when we're facing decisions like that, how many of us actually ask ourselves, what decision here would be God-honoring? It is absolutely remarkable how much clearer our decisions get and how much better our decisions get when we take God's view of something. When we don't, we wind up trying to please a lot of other people. And when we live to please other people, we become trapped. It's a kind of slavery. Eventually, we're not even sure of who we really are or what we really want. The only reason, please understand this, the only reason we live to please others is because we want something from them. It's a hard truth to accept, but it's still true. Maybe it's their approval, their acceptance, their friendship, their resources. It doesn't matter. There's something we want. But when you live to please God, there's this remarkable freedom that begins to be released into our lives. And we begin to discover who we were created to be rather than just trying to make someone else happy by being reformed into their image. When we interact with people, when you please God, you find that you interact with people in a different way. We're not just trying to get something from them. You see, there's a lot of selfishness that gets labeled as serving in our society. We do something for someone, but we expect something in return. And that isn't the biblical concept of serving at all. Please God, we treat people with generosity. And it's the approach. Not just 8 times, 5 times. We had 4 of them this morning. Daniel had just been informed that he and his 3 friends are about to be executed. And the reason is kind of interesting. King Nebuchadnezzar had had a bad dream. And so he called in his magicians and his astrologers, and he asked them to interpret the dream. And they said, tell us the dream and we will interpret it. And he said, no, this time you have to tell me the dream and interpret it. I'm not going to tell you what the dream is. They said, no, that's not how it works. You tell us the dream and then we interpret it. And he said, no, you have to tell me the dream and interpret it. Now, there are some people that think that maybe it was just a very troubling dream, but Nebuchadnezzar couldn't remember it when he woke up. How many have ever had a dream you couldn't remember when you woke up? Yeah. Seems so real, and then you can't remember it. Or it could be that this was such a troubling dream, he was concerned about revealing the details of it because it may make him appear weak in some way. We don't know exactly why he wasn't interested in telling this dream to the astrologers and to the magicians, but he chose not to. And they told him, they said, in all of human history, there has never been a single king who ever asked this of the astrologers and magicians. And there has never been a set of magicians and astrologers who could ever respond to a request like that. The only ones who know the dreams are the gods who gave them, and they do not live among men. And so the king said, fine, then you're all dead. And he goes into some detail to explain about what's going to happen to their family and their houses when he's done with them. And so the commander of the king's guard comes to Daniel to let him know. And this is what Daniel is trying to find out, why this happened. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was a very powerful king. In fact, in that day, he was the most powerful king in all the world. He imposed his will. He got what he wanted. When he gave orders, they were followed to the letter, even if it was orders of life and death. He lived in the best accommodations. He wore the best clothing. He bedded the most beautiful women. He was at the absolute top of the food chain, and everything and everyone was under him. How nice is it to be him? But even the most powerful men in the world have nightmares. That's how it is. And the dream troubled the king greatly. Why did it bother him so much? Because he was reminded he is not in control of his future. Money, access, power, prestige, reputation, none of these things can control your destiny. All of these things can be taken away in an instant. He was confronted with a very inconvenient truth. You believe you are in control, Nebuchadnezzar? You can't even control your dreams, much less your life. It's a very difficult thing for him to accept. So when Daniel heard that there was this response from the king, he spoke wisely. He spoke wisely to the commander of the guard. And he got the information that he needed, and then he did a wise thing. He went into the king and asked for time. Sometimes the wise thing to do is to ask time until you know what to do. And Daniel did that. So Daniel and his friends, they sought God to reveal the dream and its meaning. And God answered. He showed them what the dream was. That's the information. And he showed them what the dream meant. And that's the wisdom of it. So let's take a look. Let's take a little breakdown of what biblical wisdom looks like in our world and in our lives. And the first thing I want you to see is that biblical wisdom sees the big picture. First of all, we see that in the dream itself, but we also see it in Daniel's life. You see, he knew that this dream had to do with not only the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar, but many kingdoms that would follow afterwards. But Daniel he also sees it in his own life. He didn't interpret all of his present challenges as evidence that God took his eye off the ball, or worse yet, he knew the broken world. But that doesn't mean that God changed his character. Our tendency is to evaluate our future based on what's happening right now in our current circumstance. Please understand this. Things may not be easy, and things may be painful, and things may be exhausting, and they may be disappointing, but they God has a plan for your whole life that is not defined by a bad day, a bad and by other people in your life. How many are glad God's got a big picture even if you don't see it yet? Keep the big picture in mind. That's wisdom. The second thing that Daniel understood is that wisdom sees the difference between God's commands and personal convictions. Wisdom sees the difference between God's commands and personal convictions. I think I told you a couple weeks ago that talk is terribly tempting. Sunday, and confused. Is there such a big call for beets that we have to create synthetic versions of these things? I do not like. I will not eat them in a boat. I will not eat them with a goat. Here or there, I will not eat them anywhere. It's absolutely astonishing, though, how some people can take and turn it into a biblical command. They create a church where beets are out. They actually and the Daniel and you can have passing a law so Daniel would not be allowed to pray. And the penalty for not complying with the law was not a hefty fine, and it wasn't even a jail term. It was death. And not just any kind of death, death by being thrown into a pit of lions. How many think that cannot be a good way to go? Daniel prayed, executed. And Daniel prayed. You might think that a person who learned the language and the literature of Babylon would be soft on his convictions, but it's not so. He knew what to stand up for. He lived out his faith. And this is another thing about Daniel. While Daniel lived out his faith joyfully, he didn't try to impose his faith on anyone. He didn't try to make other people pray to the God of heaven. The heaven and earth, the job of the church to live. You want to know the dirty? God did not. This is what it says in that children ever lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight. In all your ways submit to him. He's not just talking about where you're going. He's talking about your patterns in life. For example, there's a way that I do life. I load the dishwasher. I load the dishwasher a certain way. I am looking for an efficiency of space. My wife loads the dishwasher a very different way. She's looking for the easiest way to get the dishes out of the dishwasher once they are clean. I want to save space. She wants to save time. Who's right? See? There's a way that I mow the lawn. There's a way goat cart. To be with her and our spouses. There's a way that we raise our to work in our neighborhood that God has taught, and what he wants us to know is how we get there matters too. All your ways, all of them. That's how our paths become straight. That's how our paths become directed by God. It's not just saying, I'm going to heaven. The question is, how are you treating or opposed to placed you. Light is too and walk in on earth. His throne. Kill for you. Relentingly. Is right and appropriate. Please them, all of them. That's a kind of you can know. We celebrated it of our decisions.
You are still. I have a reason to worship. Let's sing that again. All of my life, in every season, you are still God. I have a reason to sing. I have a reason to worship. All of my life, in every season, you are still God. I have a reason to sing. I have a reason to worship. All of my life, in every season, you are still God. I have a reason to sing. I have a reason to worship. All of my life, in every season, you are still God. I have a reason to sing. I have a reason to worship. I will bring praise. I will bring praise. No weapon formed against me shall remain. I will rejoice. I will declare God is my victory and He is here. I will bring praise. I will bring praise. No weapon formed against me shall remain. I will rejoice and I will declare God is my victory and He is here. I will bring praise. I will bring praise. No weapon formed against me shall remain. I will rejoice and declare God is here.
For us. And with humility from you. Wisdom. The world in which we live. Be seated. Just before we receive tithes and offerings, I wanted to bring you up to speed on the option that I presented last week for helping pastors from Cuba attend the pastors conference that I'll be participating in. The cost a month. It's a huge sacrifice. Conferences. They're doing it online for that. One of those dollars returns something. Really grateful for to help us continue to grow in.
Enjoy a night of. Be sure to dress up and be ready today.